In this short documentary, I'll be focusing on agricultural exceptionalism. You may be wondering what agricultural exceptionalism is. There are a multitude of definition entries that relate to the exclusions of farm workers from standards that apply to most other workers. This is basically a discrimination of farm workers themselves. Scholar Susan Snyder explained it a little bit differently. She stated that agricultural exceptionalism is a term often used to reference America's origins in labor law, where agricultural laborers are excluded from many of the protections afforded to their other workers. However, she added that the concept is evident throughout the law, with farmers protected from involuntary bankruptcy, exempted from many environmental regulations, and accepted from antitrust restrictions. She continued to say that other laws, most notably the federal farm programs, provide benefits to farmers by paying billions of dollars to farmers who produce certain favored crops. Therefore, I now submit this definition to you. Agricultural exceptionalism is not only discrimination against the farm laborer, but now has evolved to also include favoritism to the farm or agricultural land owner. The goals and objectives of this documentary are to explore the laws and precedents surrounding the beginning and reasons for agricultural exceptionalism, and then to conclude by asking if the United States is actively moving toward a post-agricultural exceptionalism period. After the Chicago Meatpackers Union went on strike in 1904, Upton Sinclair came to investigate workers' allegations about the conditions that they were forced to labor in. This led to the famous book, The Jungle. Mr. Sinclair's goal was to make the American public aware of the harsh working conditions that the food laborer was forced to work in. But this had a counter effect. What the book actually did was to alert the American public to the horrific conditions of how food was being processed and delivered to the people. The author's goal was to pierce the heart of the American people by alerting it to the conditions of their fellow mankind. However, what he did was punch it in the stomach by alerting the public to the food processing conditions. The Jungle helped usher in both the Pure Food and Drug Act and the Meat Inspection Act of 1906. These acts were meant to ensure food safety standards and to inhibit misbranding of food labels, but they did little to address the condition of the labor environment. The National Labor Relations Act of 1935, more commonly known as the Wagner Act, played a crucial role in establishing workers' rights to organize and collectively bargain in the United States. The key provisions include the protection of workers' rights to form and join labor unions and engage in collective bargaining. Under the 1935 Act, agricultural and domestic workers were excluded from the definition of employee. As a result, these workers were not granted the same rights to organize and bargain collectively as workers in other industries. This is now the point where our initial definition of agricultural exceptionalism is born, as it excludes the farm worker. The Fair Labor Standards Act, FLSA, of 1938 established minimum wage, overtime pay, record keeping, and child labor standards for both the private and public sectors. When it dealt with child labor laws and the relationship with agricultural or farm work, the Act had exemptions and variations that applied to young workers in the agricultural sector. In non-agricultural jobs, children under the age of 14 were generally prohibited from employment, with some exceptions. In agriculture, however, children of any age could be employed on small farms with their parents' consent. The FLSA restricted the types of hazardous work that younger individuals could perform. In agriculture, while there were restrictions on particular dangerous tasks, the rules were generally more permissive compared to non-agricultural industry. During the 1930s, President Franklin D. Roosevelt implemented the New Deal, a series of programs and policies in response to the Great Depression. It aimed to address economic challenges, promote recovery, and provide relief to those affected by the economic downturn. The New Deal's Agricultural Adjustment Act aimed to address agricultural overproduction and falling crop prices. It provided subsidies to farmers who agreed to reduce production. This was an attempt to stabilize crop prices and provide relief to struggling farmers. The New Deal also included initiatives to bring electricity to rural areas where many farms are located. The Rural Electrification Administration, established in 1935, provided a low-cost loans to cooperatives for the construction of electrical distribution systems. This was particularly important for improving the productivity and quality of life on farms. Thus, we now begin to see the evolution of our definition of agricultural exceptionalism. During the second half of the 20th century, the Clean Air Act and Clean Water Act were passed. The Clean Air Act does not grant broad exceptions to the agricultural sector, but there are provisions recognizing the importance of addressing agricultural emissions in practical and inflexible manner. For example, the Act allows for voluntary programs and incentives to encourage farmers to adopt practices that reduce air emissions. Even though agricultural practices can contribute to water pollution through runoff of fertilizers, pesticides, and animal waste, the Clean Water Act does contain provisions that recognize the unique challenges of regulating non-point source pollution from agriculture. Best management practices and voluntary conservation programs are often promoted to address agricultural water pollution, allowing for flexibility in implementation. During the Kennedy administration, agricultural policy was a significant concern, particularly as the United States was transitioning from agricultural policies of the previous administration. President Kennedy's approach to agriculture included efforts to address issues such as farm surpluses, price supports, and the economic challenges facing farmers. His administration introduced the Right to Farm laws, typically aimed to protect agricultural operations from nuisance lawsuits by establishing that certain common and accepted farming practices do not constitute a legal nuisance, even if they may cause inconveniences to neighbors. The Food Safety Modernization Act of 2011, or FSMA, gives the FDA increased authority to regulate the way foods are grown, harvested, and processed. The Tester Amendment refers to provision within FSMA. It is designed to address concerns raised by small-scale and local food producers regarding the potential burdens of certain provisions of FSMA. Specifically, it allows qualifying facilities to be eligible for modified requirements related to hazard analysis and risk-based prevention controls. This provision takes into account the scale and nature of operations of the smaller producers who sell the products directly to consumers or local markets. Now our definitions of agricultural exceptionalism have been firmly established, and we must ask the question of if we in the United States are moving toward a period of post-agricultural exceptionalism. The United States plays an active role in the Codex Alimentarius, a collection of international food standards, guidelines, and codes of practice established by the Food and Agricultural Organization and the World Health Organization. While we play an active role in the Codex, there was a national foodborne illness outbreak of contaminated romaine lettuce with E. coli that was traced back to an irrigation canal at a neighboring concentrated animal feeding operation in 2018. Even though it was a national outbreak, the CDC and FDA were not allowed to enter the operation without voluntary access from the operation suspected of causing the contamination. I submit to you that I do not believe we are entering a period of post-agricultural exceptionalism, but we are in fact strengthening the exceptionalisms, and instances such as this is proof that the agricultural industry itself will look out for the best interest of the owner, and now that's quite often a corporation. Farmland and agriculture is big business. Throughout the history of humankind, we ate food, we must eat food, and we will eat food again. The farm and agricultural business owners are counting on it.